Okay. Hello, everyone. Uh, my name is Yaolong Chen. I come from Lanzhou University. I'm very glad to chair this session about current state of practice guideline in China. So today we will have, I think, 13 speakers to give their presentation. So first, let's welcome to the first speaker. Her name is Yunlan Liu, who come from Lanzhou University, and the topic is the reporting quality evaluation of 2019 Chinese clinical practice guidelines. Please, Yunlan, can you share your presentation? Yeah.
Clinical practice guidelines published in 2019. In the first part, I'd like to talk about the background of the study. As we all know, clear and complete reporting on guidelines not only can help users to assess the quality of guidelines, but also helps to promote the dissemination and implementation. About the methods of the study, we used the right tool to evaluate the reporting quality of 226 Chinese guidelines published in 2019, and calculate the average reporting rate of each domain and the overall, with 60% as a qualified threshold. Then let's look at the result of the study. The average overall reporting rate of right was 33.9%, and the reporting rate of 7 domains were shown in the chart. The domain with the highest reporting rate was basic information at 59.2%, and the domain with the lowest reporting rate was review and quality assurance at 4.4%. The overall average reporting rate for Chinese guidelines published in 2019 had increased compared to the 30.2% in 2014 to 2018. However, the overall average reporting rate for the Chinese guidelines published in 2019 was much lower compared to the 78% reporting rate of the WHO guidelines. In addition, we also found that the overall average reporting rate for registered guidelines was 21.2% higher than that unregistered guidelines. Although the reporting quality of the Chinese guidelines published in 2019 had improved somewhat, it did not reach the qualified threshold and was still far from the WHO guidelines. Therefore, we recommend that guideline developers should refer to the right standard for reporting key information to improve the clarity and applicability of guidelines. That's all, thank you. If you have any question, please feel free to contact me.
Okay, thank you, Yunlan. I was wondering if there is any questions about the presentation from Yunlan. We have 3 minutes to ask and answers. Okay. Maybe we can continue. Well, the next speaker is Yunlan again. The topic is about methodological quality evaluation of 2019 Chinese clinical practice guideline. Oh, well, I noticed that just like a coin has 2 sides, right? Every study or guideline, they need to evaluate it from reporting quality and methodological quality. So next, Yunlan will give the presentation about methodological quality of the Chinese practice guideline. Well, welcome, Yunlan.
the methodological quality evaluation of Chinese clinical practice guidelines published in 2019. In the first part, I'd like to talk about the background of the study. As we all know, the methodological quality of guidelines can help users to assess whether the guideline development process is scientific. So, we evaluated the methodological quality of the Chinese guidelines published in 2019 to understand their current quality status and provide directions for the development in the future. About the methods of the study, we used the Agree2 tool to evaluate the methodological quality of the 226 Chinese guidelines published in 2019 and calculate the average methodological quality of each domain and the overall, with 60% as a qualified threshold. Then let's look at the result of the study. The overall average score of Agree2 was 22.3%, and the average score of 6 domains were shown in the chart. The domain with the highest average score was clarity of presentation at 39.1%, and the domain with the lowest average score was applicability at 14.6%. The methodological quality of the Chinese guidelines published in 2019 had improved compared with the Chinese guidelines published in 2012 to 2018. In addition, we also found that the overall average score of Agree2 for registered guidelines was 24.2% higher than that for unregistered. In conclusion, the methodological quality of Chinese guidelines showed an upward trend compared to the previous, but they have not reached the qualified threshold. Therefore, we recommend that the guideline developers should refer to domestic or international guideline development manuals to enhance the scientific process of guideline development in the future. That's all. Thank you. If you have any question, please feel free to contact me.
Thank you, Yonglan. Is there any questions about her presentation? We still have 3 minutes. Well, okay, I think we can move on. The next speaker is Qi Zhou. Qi Zhou is a master student of Lanzhou University. He has already participated more than 10 evidence-based guidelines and authored more than 30 papers in peer-reviewed journals, such as the Lancet, Journal of Clinical Epidemiology, and BMJ Open. So his topic is about methodological and reporting quality of Chinese clinical practice guideline published between 2014 and 2018. It's a systematic review. Let's welcome Qi Zhou to give his presentation.
Thank you for Professor Chen's introduction. Next, I will share my PowerPoint. Hello everyone, I'm glad to see you here. My name is Qi Zhou and I'm a PhD student from Lanzhou University in China. My presentation is the reporting and methodological quality of Chinese clinical practice guidelines published between 2014 and 2018. I have no financial or intellectual conflicts of interest in relation to this presentation. During the next 3 minutes, I will talk about my presentation from 4 aspects. Recently, a series of articles from Chinese scholars have been published in the JCE, including the history of evidence-based medicine in China, the experience and progress of using grid approach in China, the methodological and reporting quality of systematic review and clinical practice guideline. Next, I on introduction the first articles. In recent years, the number of guidelines published in China has grown rapidly. To date, the cumulative number of guidelines published in China is expected to have exceeded 100. Over the past decade, dozens of studies have evaluated the quality of Chinese CPGs. However, the previous studies do not reflect the latest situation. Some of studies evaluate only one aspect of the guidelines, such as the quality of methodological, while ignore the quality of reporting. Therefore, we designed a comprehensive study focused on both the methodological and the reporting quality of Chinese clinical practice guideline published between 2014 and 2018. We conduct a comprehensive search in multiple databases, including Medline, Embase, and other Chinese databases. A search strategy using the search terms we use the guideline recommendation Chinese and China. We include all CPGs developed by Chinese organizations or experts published in scientific journal. We using the agree instrument and red reporting checklist to assess the methodological quality and reporting quality of the included guidelines respectively. Finally, 573 clinical practice guidelines were included. Only 10.8% of clinical practice guidelines using the graded approach. The mean overscore of methodological quality over all guidelines were 19.4%, and the mean scores for the agreed two domains was as follows. Comparison with other reviews of Chinese and international guidelines, we can see that during a quarter of the methodological quality of Chinese guidelines has constantly improved. The mean reported rates of 7 domains over all guidelines were 30.2%. The rates for each domain were as follows. Figure R showed that the reporting quality of Chinese guidelines seems therefore considerably lower than the average level of WHO guidelines. In the conclusion section, we can see that CPG developed in China over the period 2014 to 2018 lacking sufficient quality. The overall mean scores of the methodological and reporting quality in the Chinese clinical practice were 19% and 30% respectively. Both the methodological quality and the reporting quality of clinical practice guidelines developed in China have improved over time, but are still below the international average. Thank you for your listening. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much, Qizhou. Based on Qizhou and Yunlan's presentation, we will know very well about clinical practice guidelines in China over the last 6 years. So if there are any questions about their topic and the presentation. Okay, so I think we can move on. The next speaker, her name is Yue Hu. Yue Hu is a postgraduate student in School of Public Health, Lanzhou University. and her major is evidence-based medicine. Today, his topic is about reporting checklists for technical guidelines on traditional Chinese medicine. Yuehu, please give your presentation.
Respectable professors and experts, my name is Hu Yue and I come from China. I am a postgraduate student in School of Public Health, Lanzhou University. The title of my abstract is Reporting Checklist for Technical Guidelines on Traditional Chinese Medicine. Traditional Chinese medicine technique is called as Shu, depending on the different perspective from performer or recipient. Shu could be divided into active and passive types. Active includes Taiji, Baduanjing, Wuqing Xi, and so on. Passive types includes massage, cupping, enoma, and so on, with the promotion of TCM technique. More and more guidelines have been developed. However, the reporting quality of them is poor, so reporting checklists of them was developed. A multidisciplinary team that included methodologists, epidemiologists, and clinicians were recruited to develop the reporting checklist of TCM technical guidelines. The group suggested the items based on a systematic review, performed 2 rounds of DFA and an expert consensus meeting, then got the final checklist. The active checklist includes basic information, operating procedures and requirements, knowledge and skills, safety, conflicts of interests, 5 main themes. The passive checklist includes basic information, operating procedures and requirements, knowledge and skills, preparation of operation procedure, safety, conflicts of interests, 7 main themes. The 2 checklists are essential for good reporting TCM technical guidelines, which could help developers properly report guidelines and assist TCM practitioners in implementing guidelines. If there are any questions, please contact me. Thank you for listening my report.
Okay, thank you very much, Yuehu. As we know, how to develop a traditional Chinese medicine guideline would be a big challenge because of the maybe most evidence is not very high. So if we would to know more details about traditional Chinese medicine methods, I think we can have the next presentation still given by Yuehu. So her next topic is the development process of traditional Chinese medicine technical guideline. Welcome, Yuehu.
Respectable professors and experts, my name is Hu Yue and I come from China. I am a postgraduate student in School of Public Health, Lanzhou University. The title of my abstract is The Development Process of Traditional Chinese Medicine Technical Guideline. TCM technique is a kind of adjuvant therapy which follows principles of the theoretical system of TCM and use techniques or facilities on body surface of patient. In order to standardize the development process and improve the quality of this guideline, we explore the process of TCM technical guideline. We systematically searched in PubMed, ECRI, Jing, NICE, CNKI MATLAB, CBM, and one found until January 14, 2021. Handbooks for development process from major international guideline organizations, World Federation of Chinese Medicine Societies, and WHO benchmarks were comprehensively taken into consideration, in addition to rounds of the Delphi and a face-to-face consensus meeting were constructed with multidisciplinary experts groups were performed. Ultimately, we formed a development process for TCM technical guideline with 11 key steps. The following 2 key steps are most innovative. In preliminary planning step, needs to clear the guideline is active or passive type, therapeutic or healthcare type. The formation of operational procedures and the requirements is different from another guidelines. We adapted from WHO benchmarks in order to reflect the particularity of TCM technical guidelines. The release of this process would promote the standardization and internationalization of TCM technical guidelines. If there are any questions, please contact me. Thank you for listening my report.
Okay, thank you very much, Yuehu. Is there any questions about the topic of development of traditional Chinese medicine? We still have 3 minutes. Well, okay, so let's move on. The next speaker, her name is Ruobing Lei. She is a master of Ruobing Lei. Yeah, she's a master of evidence-based nursing work in National Clinical Research Center for Child Health and Disorders, Children's Hospital of Chongqing Medical University. Her research interests include evidence-based medicine, clinical practice guidelines, and patient and public guidelines. She has participated in the development of several guidelines and published relevant peer-reviewed articles. Today, her presentation topic is quality appraisal of clinical practice guidelines on physical restraints. So welcome, Ruobing.
Lei. I'm from Children's Hospital of Chongqing Medical University in China. Thanks for the Gene Conference, which gave me the opportunity to share our research. Physical restraints are defined as a manual approach to reduce a patient's physical movement, and has been regarded as a protective measure in the intensive care unit to avoid unplanned extubation, falls, and other unexpected events. With the development of a holistic care model, more and more scholars have begun to pay attention to the adverse effects of excessive physical restraints on patients. However, it is unclear whether there are currently high-quality clinical practice guidelines to guide practice in physical restraints. We conducted the systematic review following the Prisma Statement guidelines. 2 reviewers independently searched 6 databases using a combined text, word, and mesh heading search strategy. And we extracted basic information, for example, developing organization, publication date, and etc. 2 reviewers independently used the agree to and write to assess the methodological quality and the reporting quality of included guidelines. A total of 550 articles were retrieved and 6 guidelines were included. The figure shows the selection process. The mean score of the included guidelines were 41.92%. The mean reporting rate for guidelines was 41%. This figure shows the overall agreed to scores and the right scores for each guideline. For methodological quality, no guideline was classified as high quality. Domain 4 clarity of presentation had the highest score. Domain 5 applicability had the lowest score. For reporting quality, only one guideline was classified as moderate reported. Among the 7 domains, Domain 1 information had the highest reporting rate, while Domain 6 had the lowest reporting rate. In general, the methodological and reporting quality of physical restraints guidelines is low, and the future development or updating of high-quality guidelines to guide clinical practice is needed. A systematic approach in the development of these guidelines and updating timely is needed. In some regions, more attention for guideline adaptation is recommended. That's all I wanted to share today. If you have any questions, please contact me through the email. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ruobin. Yes, we believe there's a lot of work to do to improve the quality of those guidelines. So is there any questions about the topic? Just give by Ruobin Lei. Okay, so let's move on. The next topic is very interesting. It's about artificial intelligence in practice guidelines from Xu Fei Luo. Xu Fei Luo is pursue a master's degree in public health at Lanzhou University, where his research focuses on the development of evidence-based clinical practice guidelines, evidence-based public health decision-making, and evidence-based methodologies. So today, Xu Fei's topic is an automated quality evaluation system for clinical practice guideline. It's a conceptual design. Welcome, Xu Fei.
Hello, everyone. I'm Xufei Luo. I'm from the Lanzhou University of China. I'm delighted to be here with you talking about our new conceptual project of automated quality evaluation system. As we know, we can use agreed to tools to evaluate the quality of clinical practice guidelines. Of course, we can use red checklist to check the reporting quality of guidelines. But we know that agreed to tools has 6 domains and an oral assessment with a total of 23 items. For me, it takes me half an hour to evaluate a guideline. Besides, some items are not easily identified in the guidelines. All of this will take us heavy workload, time waste, as well as waste of money. Fortunately, as we know, many tasks of systematic review have the potential to be automated or may be assisted by automation. Recent advances in natural language processing, text mining, and machine learning have produced new algorithms that can accurately mimic human endeavor in systematic review activity. Some automated tools, such as robot review, have been shown that saving time and saving money for systematic review authors. As we know, robot review can be used to assess the risk or bias of RCT. The website of allows users to upload RCT article and they automatically determine information concerning a trial conduct. The objective of our project is to develop a tool or algorithm that allows rapid and reliable evaluation of guidelines based on agree or write or IOM criteria, just like rote review for RCT. We are now working the protocol of this project. We will establish the working group and wrap up this project in the next 2 years. These are the channels that you could get in contact with us if you are interested in this project. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Xufei. It's a very hot topic, right? But as your title of the presentation, we would like to know more details. But today you just give us a real conceptual design. Maybe we look forward to, the tool or algorithms in the future, because every year, every month, we really spend a lot of time and human resources to evaluate guidelines qualities. Is there any questions about the topic given by Xufei? Okay, so let's move to the next speaker, Bo Yang. There's little information about her introduction. So I believe Bo Yang come from Chongqing Children's Hospital, and today his topic is the systematic review of the recommendations of 2019 pediatric clinical practice guidelines from a clinical perspective. Welcome, Bo Yang.
Hello everyone, I'm Bo Yang. I'm from the Children's Hospital of Chongqing Medical University in China. I'm delighted to be here with you talking about our systematic review. As we all know, there are numerous and increasing numbers of guidelines published every year, especially in the past 5 years. According to these guidelines, only 10% guidelines focus on pediatrics, and children are not a smaller version of adults, and there is insufficient analysis of the clinical application of pediatric guidelines. So we conducted the systematic review. First, we searched and identified the English and Chinese pediatric guidelines published in 2019. Then we extracted basic information, disease, and recommendations of the guidelines, and categorized the recommendations according to clinical department and clinical process. At last, we analyzed the number and percentage of the recommendations. Finally, a total of 126 guidelines were included. The 2019 pediatric guidelines cover 26 clinical departments, and the top 3 departments for the recommendations are psychiatric department, respiratory department, and rheumatology department. And the top 3 clinical process of the recommendations are the therapy, diagnosis, and technology support of the disease. Our systematic review analyzed the clinical situation of the 2019 pediatric guidelines. We identified the predominant clinical department and clinical process of the guidelines, and we hope more guidelines will focus on pediatric population, especially the recommendations on disease screening, patient health education, and disease management to help improve pediatric clinical practice. If you are interested in this project, you can contact with us through the email. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Bo Yang. I noticed that there's questions from Dr. Amir Quesmi. He would like to know any differences when reviewing guidelines using a great tool and right checklist. It's a very good question. I believe some speakers tonight in this session, because some of them, they use both right and agree to evaluate national and international guidelines. So is there anyone would like to answer Dr. Christmas questions? You can just let me know. So okay, maybe you guys need to think about the answers to need a couple of minutes. So let's move on. Is there any questions about Bo Yang's topic? If no, let's move on to the next speaker, Hui Liu. Hui Liu is a master student from School of Public Health. His research interests include evidence-based medicine, clinical practice guideline, and public health. He has participated in the development of several guidelines and published more than 10 peer-reviewed articles. I noticed that Hui Liu has 3 presentations today. The first one is current status of guidelines for foreign body in digestive tract. Hui Liu, please give your presentation first.
Hello everybody, I'm Hui Liu, come from School of Public Health, Lanzhou University, China. Today, my presentation is current status of guidelines for foreign body in digestive tract. The objective of this study is to analyze the current status of guidelines in the field of foreign body in the digestive tract and evaluated the necessity of developing guidelines for Chinese adult children with foreign body in the digestive tract. PubMed and China National Knowledge Infrastructure were searched systematically, supplemented by Google and Google Scholar. Meanwhile, the references in the included literature were traced, and experts in the field were consulted. 2 researchers independently scanned the records and extracted the relevant information of the included guidelines. 5 guidelines or countries were included. In terms of country, there were 6 guidelines in America, 2 in England, 3 in China, and 1 in Italy, Germany, France, and the Netherlands, respectively. In terms of year, these guidelines were published in 1995 to 2021. In terms of target population, there were 5 guidelines used for children, 2 used for adults, and 8 guidelines were unclear. In terms of methodology, there were 9 guidelines that had methodology. In terms of evidence grading system, 4 guidelines reported the evidence grading system, 3 GREED, and 1 Oxford Center for Evidence-Based Medicine. In terms of clearance of recommendations, 7 guidelines of the recommendations were clear and to be found easily. So the above analysis, we come to the conclusion that the number of guidelines in the field of foreign body in digestive tract has been increasingly recently. However, there is no high-quality guidelines for children in China. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Hui Liu. And just as I mentioned before, every year thousands of practice guidelines. They are developed and published in different countries, in different societies and organizations. However, we really need to do a lot of work to improve their quality, whatever methodological quality and the reporting quality. Is there any questions about Hui Liu's first presentation? Okay, so let's move on. His secondary presentation is about current status of research gaps in the 2019 Chinese guidelines. Please go ahead, Hui Liu.
Hello everybody, I'm Hui Liu, come from School of Public Health, Lanzhou University, China. Today, my presentation title is Current Status of Research Gaps in the 2019 Chinese Guidelines. Research gaps in guidelines usually refer to suggestions to conduct future research. It can reflect the methodology and reporting quality of guidelines. The objective of this study is to investigate the reporting status of reference of research gaps in Chinese guidelines in 2019. A systematic search of Chinese guidelines published in peer-reviewed journals in 2019 were conducted. Two researchers independently judged whether research gaps were reported in the guideline and extracted relevant information. A total of 226 guidelines were included. 27 guidelines reported research gaps. Among the guidelines that reported research gaps, containing 78 research gaps, with an average of 2.89 research gaps per guideline. In terms of content of research gaps, the main focus is on efficiency, safety, and biomarkers. In terms of the heterogeneity of research gaps, the number of research gaps reported in each guideline is between 1 and 10. 15 guidelines presented research gaps in separate sections such as problem to be solved, priority suggestions for future research, suggestions for future research, while 12 guidelines incorporated research gaps into sections for presentation, such as summary, discussion, or conclusions. In terms of clarity of research gaps, only 45 research gaps could be deconstructed according to the PICO principle, with the largest number of research gaps containing population intervention and outcome, and the smallest number of research gaps containing population intervention and comparison. The reporting rate and the clarity of research gaps in the Chinese guidelines in 2019 need to be improved, and the heterogeneity of the reporting needs to be reduced. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hui Liu. As we all know, clinical practice guideline has two functions. One is to provide recommendations to help clinicians to make good decision making based on current available evidence. And the other function is to help researchers to design good quality studies based on the research gap, so that researchers could change the recommendation if they published their clinical trials. However, we noticed that very few clinical practice guidelines, they report research gap or evidence gap. So we need to improve the reporting quality about this area. Is there any questions about Hui Liu's topic? and the presentation. Well, okay, let's move on. Once again, Hui Liu will give his third presentation. The topic is Analyze Practice Guidelines on the registration of International Practice Guidelines registry platform. Welcome, Hui Liu.
Hello everybody, I'm Hui Liu, come from School of Public Health, Lanzhou University, China. Today, my presentation title is Analysis Practice Guidelines on the Registration of International Practice Guidelines Registry Platform. International Practice Guidelines Registry Platform, generally shortened to IPGRP, was established on January 1, 2014, and began its official run at the end of 2014. But so far, guidelines registration information of the platform has not been fully analyzed. The aim of this study is to analyze quantity and related information of guidelines registration on the IPGRP from inception to August 31, 2021. The IPGRP administrator provided information about the registration guidelines. Two researchers have carefully collected and analyzed the related information. The IPGRP has registered a total of 630 guidelines or consensus, including 267 standard guidelines, 22 patient guidelines, 26 rapid recommendation guidelines, 91 Chinese medicine guidelines, 213 expert consensus, and 11 other guidelines. Grid system was used in 439 guidelines, and 498 guidelines were based on systematic review. In terms of languages, 605 were registered in Chinese and 25 in English. In terms of field, the guidelines are dominated diagnosis and treatment. In terms of version, most of guidelines are original guidelines. In terms of funding support, 453 guidelines have funding support, including a total of 637 funding grants, with the highest number of grants at the national level. In terms of diseases covered by guidelines, according to ICD-11 classification, the number of guidelines related to disorder of musculoskeletal system or connective tissue is the largest. The number of registration of guidelines consensus in IPGRP increased rapidly, however, mainly in original version and Chinese. Thus, the platform needs to be further promoted in the future. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hui Liu. It's a very interesting topic because, just this year, together with the other scientists, we published a paper in Annals of Internal Medicine about clinical practice guideline registry, because this guideline registry can help guidelines toward reducing duplication, improving collaboration, and increasing transparency. So is there any questions about Hui Liu's topic? Okay, so next speaker is Yajia Sun. She is also a master student from School of Public Health in Lanzhou University. Her topic is current status of 2020 published guidelines in China. It's a cross-sectional study. So Yajia, welcome.
Hello, everyone. I'm a master's student from the School of Public Health, Lanzhou University, China. And my topic today is the status quo of 2020 published guidelines in China. It is well known that with the continuous development of evidence-based medicine, the quality of clinical practice guidelines in China and abroad is constantly improving. The aim of this study is to investigate the published guidelines in the past years, which may pave the way for further development of guidelines in China. We selected guidelines published in the various journals of the Chinese Medical Association Publishing House, and 177 guidelines were included by independently manual searching, screening, and verification with every chief authors. The information was extracted for the language of publication, theme areas, disease classifications, registration status, conflict of interests, funding supports, and use of quality of evidence and grading of recommendations assessment methods. The majority of the included guidelines were in Chinese, and a total of 10 guidelines mentioned being registered on the International Practice Guideline Registry platform. And still a large proportion of the guidelines lacked this transparent step, which was recommended in the WHO Handbook for Guideline Development. As the bar chart shows, the types of disease that the guidelines focused on are mainly central infections or parasitic disease, and the most are diagnosis and treatment guidelines. Less than 25% of guidelines use both quality of evidence and grading of recommendations assessment, and the grade methods was the most common tool. 74 guidelines reported funding information, and 33 guidelines mentioned receiving funds, the main sources of which were the National Key R&D Program of China and the National Science and Technology Major Project, as well as the National Natural Science Foundation of China. From these results, can be deemed that there is a still lack of awareness of registration, the quality of evidence, and grading of recommendations assessment, and a short of clarity in the reporting of fund support in the guideline development, which needs a further improvement in the future. This is my introduction to this poster, and I'm looking forward to communication and discussion with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jia. It's a great presentation and also great pronunciation. So is there any questions about Jia's topic? We have 3 minutes. Okay, so let's move on. The last speaker in this session is Renfen Su. She's also a master student in Lanzhou University and has been in evidence-based medicine for a short time. Okay. So Renfen's today's topic is about current status of guidelines for acute pancreatitis. So welcome, Renfen.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Renfen Shu, a student of Lanzhou University in China. Now, let me introduce my poster to you. My poster title is Current Status of Guidelines for Acute Pancreatitis. To analyze the current status of guidelines in the field of acute pancreatitis and evaluate the necessity of formulating guidelines for Chinese children with acute pancreatitis. We use a systematic research using PubMed, Embase, ThinkAI, OneFund, and CBM biomedicals, subject to heading Acute Pancreatitis Guidelines and Consensus. We manually searched Gene, Line, Sign, WHO, and Imatone. Two researchers independently screened and extracted the relevant information of the included guidelines through Excel. As a result, we found that a total of 2,122 records were retrieved from PubMed invest in KI-1 and CPM, and 46 were included after screening. Gene 9 sign, WHO, and hematome were searched manually, and 41 related literature were included. Due to the large number of literatures and the tallies of the guidelines, the literatures before 2010 were excluded, and finally, 36 guideline concepts were included. On the national side, there were 17 in China, 9 in America, 2 in Australia, Japan, Italy, and Hungary, 1 in Canada and the European Association. In terms of year, we only included the guideline concepts after 2011. In terms of target population, there were only 4 guidelines used for adults. In terms of methodology, there were 14 guidelines had methodology. In terms of evidence guiding system, 16 guidelines reported the evidence guiding system. In terms of the clearance of recommendations, 27 guidelines of the recommendation were clear and to be found easily. In summary, the number of guidelines for acute pancreatitis has been increasing. However, there is no high-quality guidelines for children in China. Therefore, this is necessary to formulate guidelines for acute pancreatitis in digestive tract of Chinese children in patient and public version. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much, Ren Fen. Very good topic. So if there are any questions about Ren Fen's presentation? Okay, so I believe that we have already all speakers give their presentation in this session. And is there anyone or speakers would like to answer the questions I just mentioned, which raised by Dr. Amir Qasmi, the difference between a gray checklist and the right checklist? Because I noticed a couple of speakers, they have already used 2 instruments to evaluate guidelines.
Hello, Professor Yao Long.
Hello, Xufei. Could you please share your answer about it?
Yeah, I will try to answer this question. Hello, everyone. I'm Xufei. Because I have evaluated more than 100 practice guidelines since the publication of RIGHT. So in my view, I think firstly, when we use agree and RIGHT to evaluate the guidelines, they often produce the consistent results. And second, I think RIGHT is simple and easy to use than agree. And third, agree place more emphasis on the methodology of the guidelines, and the RIGHT maybe place more emphasis on reporting quality. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, very good points. As we know, for some clinicians and researchers, they always have a little bit confusion about a gray checklist and the right checklist. So thank you, Xufei, to give us a very good answer. Is there any speaker to add something in difference, or try to answer the questions?
Hello, Professor Chen.
Hello,
I'm
Robin.
Lei.
Yeah, I have one question, because we all know that there are some overlapped items between the right checklist and the agree to. And so how we using, and because when we use those two tools to do the quality appraisal of the guidelines, we found that it's kind of difficult to differentiate those two overlapped items. So I want to know how you or how the other speakers they deal with those overlapped items. Thank you.
Very good question. Actually, this issue is also existed in systematic review. As we all know, we can use ARMSTAR to evaluate the methodological quality of systematic review, and we can also use Prisma to evaluate the reporting quality of systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Those two tools are also a little bit overlap. But for clinical trials, especially for randomized controlled trials, I believe the two tools, they have their strengths and characters, which I would like you to know that if you would like to evaluate risk of bias of randomized controlled trials, you can use Cochrane, a Cochrane risk of bias tool, right? It's just, I remember 5 items, but you would like to evaluate the report quality of clinical trials or randomized controlled trials. Consult will provide more details and the checklist to help you prepare your clinical trials. So what I mean is that both developers of systematic reviews and clinical practice guidelines, they need to learn experience from how to develop, risk of bias tools and reporting quality tools of randomized control trials, because maybe you have no confusions when you use ROB and consult to evaluate RCT's quality. So in terms of clinical practice guideline, I believe the first thing is that the right working group and the agree collaboration, they need to work together to discuss how to work together to distinguish the two tools so that users can clearly know their difference and how to use them in different contexts. And the next suggestion is that I'm always concerned the term quality evaluation, because for the randomized control trial, if we would like to evaluate the methodological quality, we use the term risk of bias. So I'm not sure for agree collaboration if they in the future would like to replace the methodological quality with risk of bias of guidelines, because when we develop or when we read a clinical practice guidelines, we need to know their risk of bias and if they can we trust those guidelines. So I believe risk of bias is a better term compared with the current use term methodological quality. So So I hope those answers could help you.
Thank you. That's very useful comments for me.
Okay, you're welcome. So is there any speakers would like to answer above questions or would like to interactive in this session?
Hello, Professor Chen. I'd like
Hello,
to,
Qizhou. Yeah.
I'd like to answer the Professor Emil Quinn's question about the difference between agree to and right.
Good.
Both agree to and right checklist have their own strengths and limitations. Appropriate half of the items from the agree and right checklist complete overlap. The unique items of right emphasize using presentation form. For example, elements to include a CPG title, a list of abortions, and the contact information of the corresponding developers. These items are good demand for CPG developers. The unique items of agree to advanced evidence selection criteria from primary literature search from a primary literature search. Readers will note how the systematic was conducted. This is my some opinions about agree to and right. Thank you.
Thank you, Qizhou. You reminded me to, I remember that there's a paper authored by Xiaomei Yao, Dr. Xiaomei Yao. She also mentioned the points you just shared with us. Very good suggestions. So is there anyone have any questions about all our topics and speakers? Okay, I believe we will finish ahead of schedule. I appreciate all speakers and all audience. Thank you very much for your great presentation, and thank you very much for your time. And have a nice day. Bye.